I have worked with electricity my entire adult life. 23 years as an electrician, fixing wires and reading meters and understanding the flow of power through homes and businesses. I know how lights are supposed to behave. I know what a normal electrical hum sounds like. I know when something is wrong with a circuit, and something is very wrong with the power in Crestwood. My name is Warren Holt. I am 44 years old, and I live in a small town in rural Arkansas that most people have never heard of. 12 days ago, an ice storm hit us harder than anything in living memory. The power went out for 9 days. 9 days of cold and darkness, of huddling around fireplaces and waiting for the crews to restore what the storm had taken. The power came back 3 days ago. Everyone celebrated. The lights came on, the heat kicked in, life returned to normal. Except nothing is normal anymore. I'm sitting in my truck outside the town's only grocery store, watching the lights flicker through the windows. They have been flickering for 3 days now, pulsing in patterns that make no sense. And the people inside do not seem to notice at all. Something came back with the power, something that is using the grid, spreading through the wires, changing everything it touches. And I am the only one who seems to know. The ice storm began on a Tuesday night in late January. Freezing rain fell for 18 straight hours, coating every surface in a shell of ice so thick that branches snapped under the weight. The sound was constant, a crackling symphony of breaking wood and groaning metal as the infrastructure of the town slowly collapsed. The power went out around 3 in the morning on Wednesday. I woke to silence, the absence of the refrigerator's hum and the heater's drone, leaving my house feeling hollow and dead. I looked out the window and saw a world transformed. Every tree and fence post and power line encased in glass, beautiful and terrible. The next 9 days were hard. Crestwood was a small town, isolated from the larger communities that got priority for power restoration. The crews worked their way outward from the cities while we waited in the cold. I helped where I could. My skills as an electrician were valuable, and I spent long days working alongside the utility crews, assessing damage, splicing wires, doing whatever was needed to bring the power back faster. I noticed things during those days. Strange things that I dismissed at the time as fatigue and stress. The way certain power lines seemed to hum even when they were disconnected. The way the ice on some transformers glowed faintly at night, a pale blue light that vanished when you looked directly at it. The way the air near the main substation felt charged, electric, alive in ways that had nothing to do with voltage. I told myself it was my imagination, told myself the cold and the exhaustion were playing tricks on my mind. Then the power came back, and I realized the tricks were just beginning. It was a Saturday evening, around 6 o'clock, the sun already down and the town shrouded in darkness. I was at home, reading by candlelight, when the lights suddenly blazed to life. The relief was immediate. 9 days without power, finally over. I walked through my house, turning on lights, checking outlets, making sure everything was working. The refrigerator hummed, the heater kicked on, the television came alive with static before settling into a local news broadcast. Everything seemed normal, but something felt wrong. I could not identify it at first. Just a sense of unease, a feeling that the house was different somehow. The light seemed brighter than before, with a slightly blue tint that I had never noticed. The electrical hum was louder, more present, vibrating at a frequency that seemed to resonate in my chest. I checked the circuits, tested the voltage, ran every diagnostic I knew. Everything was within normal parameters. The power was clean, the connections were solid, the system was functioning exactly as it should. But the feeling persisted. I went outside to check my meter. The dial was spinning normally, measuring consumption the way it always had. But as I watched, I noticed something strange. The dial hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable. But I had been reading meters for 20 years. I knew how they were supposed to move. The dial hesitated, then continued, then hesitated again, as if something in the flow of electricity was pulsing, stopping, starting in a rhythm that had no place in a normal power grid. I looked down the street. Every house had its lights on now, every window glowing with that slightly blue illumination, and in each window, I could see the lights pulsing, not flickering, pulsing, all of them together, in perfect synchronization, beating like a slow, steady heart. I went back inside and turned off all my lights, sat in the darkness, listening to the hum of electricity in my walls, and wondered what had really come back when the power returned. It began with the animals. Dogs that had always barked at strangers fell silent, staring at nothing, their eyes tracking movements that no one else could see. Cats refused to enter rooms with electrical outlets, hissing and retreating whenever someone turned on a light. Birds stopped landing on power lines. I noticed it the days after the power returned, driving through town and seeing the lines empty when they should have been crowded with starlings and sparrows. The birds circled overhead, crying out warnings that no one understood, but they would not touch the wires. Then the changes started happening to people. It was subtle at first, small things that could be dismissed as fatigue or stress after the ordeal of the storm. Elaine Mosher, who ran the hardware store, started speaking in a flat monotone, her usual warmth and humor replaced by mechanical responses. Carl Dunning, the postmaster, began walking with a stiff, jerky gait, as if his joints were not quite working right. I noticed that the affected people all had one thing in common. They spent a lot of time around electronics. Elaine worked at a register all day, the electronic beeping of the scanner constant in her ears. Carl sorted mail under fluorescent lights, surrounded by the hum of computers and sorting machines. The more exposure, the more pronounced the changes. I started watching more closely. I saw customers enter the grocery store normal and leave slightly different. Saw children who had been playing outside grow quiet and still after spending an hour in front of the television. Saw my neighbors sitting in their living rooms, bathed in the blue glow of their screens, their faces slack and empty. No one else seemed to notice, or if they noticed, they did not care. The changes were gradual enough that they could be explained away. People were tired. People were recovering from the stress of the storm. People were just acting a little strange. But I could see the pattern forming, could see the correlation between electrical exposure and behavioral changes. Something in the power was changing people, and it was spreading. The hum was everywhere, low and constant, emanating from every electrical source in town. Not the normal 60 Hz buzz of alternating current. Something deeper, more complex, with undertones and harmonics that should not exist. I heard it in my walls, in the streetlights, in the transformers on every corner. A sound that was not quite sound, more like a vibration that resonated in my bones, in my teeth, in the soft tissue of my brain. The hum was loudest at night. I would lie in bed, listening to it pulse through my house, and I could almost hear something in the frequency. Not words exactly, but something like communication. Like the electricity itself was carrying a message, a signal, instructions for whatever was changing the people of Crestwood. I started sleeping with my breaker switched off, sitting in the darkness, listening to the silence, feeling the absence of that constant vibration. It was the only time I felt normal anymore, the only time my thoughts felt entirely my own. But even with my power off, I could hear the hum from neighboring houses, could feel it seeping through the walls, through the ground, through the very air. The entire town was saturated with it, every building and street and person immersed in that strange frequency. I tried to record the sound, used my phone, then a professional audio recorder I borrowed from a friend. But the recordings came back empty, showing nothing but the normal ambient noise of a house with electricity. The hum could not be captured, could not be measured, could only be heard by people who were paying attention. And fewer people in Crestwood were paying attention to anything anymore. I visited Mitchell Garner, an old friend who worked at the power company's local substation. Mitchell had always been a skeptic, a practical man who believed in science and evidence and rational explanations. Mitchell did not remember the ice storm. He looked at me with blank, glassy eyes and asked what storm I was talking about. Said the power had never gone out. Said everything was normal. Everything was fine. Everything was exactly as it should be. I looked around the substation. The equipment was humming louder here, the vibration almost visible, shimmering in the air. And Mitchell was standing in the middle of it, marinating in that frequency, his face slack and empty and wrong. I left without saying goodbye. I was not sure Mitchell would have noticed anyway. The more I noticed, the more I stood out. People started looking at me strangely, their heads tilting in unison when I walked by, their eyes tracking my movements with an intensity that felt predatory. I stopped using electricity altogether, unplugged everything in my house, switched off the main breaker, lived by candlelight and propane like I had during the storm. The darkness felt safer than the light. The silence felt healthier than the hum. But I could not avoid electricity entirely. It was everywhere, in every building I entered, in every street I walked down, in the very air of the town. The power lines loomed overhead like veins carrying something toxic through the body of Crestwood. I tried to leave, packed my truck, headed for the highway, planned to drive until I found a town that still felt normal. But the roads out of Crestwood were blocked, not physically, not with barricades or checkpoints, just blocked in a way that I could not explain. I would drive toward the edge of town and find myself somehow turned around, heading back toward the center, the route that should have led away instead, leading deeper into the hum. I tried 3 times. Each time, I ended up back in front of my own house, the lights pulsing in the windows even though I had turned everything off, the hum welcoming me home. Something did not want me to leave. The thing in the electricity, whatever it was, had chosen Crestwood as its home, and everyone in Crestwood belonged to it now. Everyone except me. I did not know why I was different, did not know why the hum did not work on me the way it worked on everyone else. Maybe it was my years of working with electricity. Some developed awareness of its effects. Maybe it was my habit of sleeping without power, giving my brain time to reset. Maybe I was just lucky. Or maybe I was not immune at all. Maybe I was just changing more slowly, and eventually I would become like all the others, blank and empty and humming along with the rest of the town. I hoped I would figure something out before that happened. I knew the power came from somewhere, flowed through the substation, spread out through the grid to every home and business. If something had contaminated it, the contamination had to have an origin point. I started at the substation where Mitchell worked, drove past it at night, watching from a distance, and saw things that confirmed my worst suspicions. The equipment was glowing, not the normal indicator lights and safety illumination, but a soft blue luminescence that seemed to come from the transformers themselves, from the wires, from the very metal of the infrastructure. The glow pulsed in that same rhythm I had seen in the lights, that same heartbeat that had spread through the entire town. And there were people at the substation, dozens of them, standing in neat rows, their faces upturned toward the transformers, their bodies swaying slightly in time with the pulse. I recognized some of them, my neighbors, my customers, people I had known for years. They were not doing anything, just standing there, absorbing the glow, letting it wash over them like light from a sun that should not exist. I traced the power lines back from the substation, following them out of town toward the main transmission lines that connected Crestwood to the larger grid. The lines ran through several miles of forest before reaching the regional hub. I drove the route during the day, when I felt slightly safer. The power lines ran alongside the road, and I watched them as I drove, looking for anything unusual. About 5 miles outside of town, I found it. A section of line that had come down during the ice storm. The poles snapped, the wires lying on the ground. This was not unusual. Lots of lines had come down during the storm. What was unusual was what had happened after. The repair was wrong. I had helped with repairs all across the county, and I knew what proper work looked like. This repair was different. The wires had been spliced in ways that made no sense, looped and wound in configurations that served no electrical purpose. And there was something in the splice, something dark and organic looking, incorporated into the wires like a tumor grafted onto healthy tissue. I did not get out of my truck, did not approach the repair. I just sat there, staring at the thing in the wires, and watched as it pulsed with that same slow rhythm. The thing in the wires was alive, and it was feeding power into Crestwood. The ice storm had damaged the power lines, created a break in the grid that allowed something to get in. Something that existed in the spaces between electricity and darkness, in the void that opened when power failed and then returned. I did not know what it was, did not know if it was a creature, an intelligence, a force of nature that had found a new way to express itself. I only knew that it had merged with the power grid, had become part of it, flowing through the wires like electricity, reaching every outlet and light fixture and appliance in town. The people of Crestwood were being converted, rewired from the inside by the constant exposure to the thing's frequency. Their brains were being reprogrammed, their personalities erased, their bodies becoming vessels for something that was not human. And soon there would be no one left who remembered what normal felt like. I gathered my tools, my truck, everything I would need to cut the power line and destroy the splice that connected the thing to Crestwood. I drove out to the repair site at dawn, hoping that the early hour would give me some advantage. The thing seemed stronger at night, when the lights were on, when the hum was loudest. Maybe in the daylight, with the sun providing its own illumination, I would have a chance. The splice was still there, pulsing slowly, that dark organic mass woven into the wires. I parked my truck and approached with my tools, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. The closer I got, the louder the hum became. It was not coming from the wires anymore. It was coming from everywhere, from the ground beneath my feet, from the air around me, from inside my own head. The thing knew I was there. The thing knew what I was trying to do. I raised my cutters and reached for the wire. The hum intensified, became a sound that was not a sound, a pressure that built in my skull, a force that pushed against my thoughts and tried to reshape them. I felt my grip weaken, my resolve falter, my mind begin to slip into the rhythm that had claimed everyone else. I cut the wire. The splice screamed. A sound like nothing I had ever heard, like 1,000 voices crying out in frequencies that should not exist. The dark mass in the wires convulsed, thrashed, then went still. The hum stopped. I stood there in the sudden silence, listening to the absence of sound, waiting for something to happen. But nothing happened. The sky did not fall. The earth did not shake. The world continued turning as if nothing had changed. I drove back to Crestwood, hoping that I had done something right. The power was still on when I returned. The lights were still burning. But something had changed. The people were waking up. I saw them in the streets, looking around with confusion in their eyes, asking each other what day it was, what had happened, why they felt so strange. The blank expressions were gone, replaced by bewilderment and fear. Mitchell Garner stopped me on the street, asked me if I knew what was going on, said he felt like he had been dreaming for days, dreaming about something dark and humming, something that wanted to be everywhere at once. I did not know how to answer, did not know how to explain what had happened without sounding insane. I just told Mitchell that the storm had been hard on everyone, that things were going to be okay now. But I was not sure that was true. The people were waking up, but I did not know if they were unchanged. Did not know if the thing had left anything behind when it was severed from the grid. Did not know if the damage could be undone or if it would linger forever. And I did not know if the thing was really dead. I had cut one splice, destroyed one connection, but the thing could have spread to other places, other grids, other towns. The ice storm had been regional. Power lines had come down across 4 counties. Any one of them could have been a point of entry. I started watching the news, looking for reports of strange behavior in other communities, looking for the signs I had learned to recognize in Crestwood. So far, I have not found anything. But that does not mean it is not out there. Pay attention the next time your power goes out. Pay attention to what happens when it comes back. Notice the hum of your appliances, the flicker of your lights, the feel of the electricity flowing through your walls. If something seems different, trust your instincts. If the lights seem brighter than before, if the hum seems louder, if the people around you start acting slightly wrong, do not dismiss it as stress or imagination. Turn off your power. Step outside, into the sunlight, away from the grid. Give yourself time to think, time to feel, time to make sure your thoughts are still your own. I do not know what the thing in the wires was. Do not know where it came from or what it wanted. I only know that it used the power grid to spread, that it changed everyone it touched, and that it almost consumed an entire town before I stopped it. Almost. I'm still not sure I stopped it completely. Still not sure that Crestwood is really free, that the people are really themselves again, that the damage has been undone. I have kept my power off ever since that morning. Live in darkness by candlelight and propane, the way I did during the storm. It is lonely and inconvenient, but it is safe. I know my thoughts are my own. I know the hum cannot reach me. Last night, driving through Crestwood, I noticed something. The lights are starting to flicker again, just a little, just enough to notice if you are paying attention. A subtle pulse, a faint rhythm, a heartbeat trying to restart. I do not know if the thing survived, if it is rebuilding, if it will come back stronger than before. All I know is that I will be watching, and I will be ready, because the power always comes back eventually, and sometimes something comes back with it. I have been sitting in my truck for the past hour, watching the grocery store, watching the lights pulse in those windows. The people inside are moving normally now, shopping and talking, going about their lives. They look fine. They look like themselves. But every few seconds, the lights flicker, just a little, just enough. And when they flicker, the people pause, just for a moment, just long enough to notice if you are paying attention. Then they keep moving, keep shopping, keep pretending that everything is normal. I wonder if they know. I wonder if some part of them remembers what it felt like to be connected to that thing, to be part of that hum, to lose themselves in the rhythm of something vast and hungry and patient. I wonder if they will remember when it comes back, because it will come back. I can feel it. The silence I created when I cut that wire was temporary. The thing is still out there, still flowing through grids I cannot reach, still waiting for another opportunity. The next ice storm, the next power outage, the next break in the lines that lets it slip through, it will find a way back. It always does. And when it does, I will be here, watching, waiting, ready to cut the wire again, to fight for the people who do not know they need fighting for. The lights in the grocery store pulse one more time. The people inside pause, then continue. I start my truck and drive home. Tomorrow, I will check the lines again. Tomorrow, I will look for signs that the thing is returning. Tonight, I will sit in the darkness and listen to the silence. It is the only place I feel safe anymore.